Hello and welcome to Formula Phil. Alright guys, how we doing? Today we're going to be doing a video on the 1958 Argentine Grand Prix, and what makes that so special is how it was won. So let's find out. This story mainly concerns Stirling Moss. Moss was contracted to compete in Formula 1 with the Van Wall team, but Van Wall were not ready for the Argentine Grand Prix, leaving Moss without a drive, so he decided to enter in Rob Walker's privately run Cooper Climax. The Cooper Climax was, in fact, barely 2 litres, and it was rear-engined and little more than a Formula 2000 car, and it was dwarfed by the front-engined 2.4-litre Ferraris and Maseratis. The Cooper was very light, which made amends for its tiny engine, but it suffered from a critical disadvantage. It took ages to change the 4-stud wheels. The knockoff hubs of the opposition would give them the equivalent of a lap and a half of an advantage, so a tyre change was out of the question. The toughest tyres available were made by Continental, so the small privateer squad threw on those tyres and brimmed the Cooper Climax with fuel. Then Moss went about the pit lane feigning despair and complaining to anyone who would listen about the 4-stud wheels and how it would take ages to change these wheels, that he hadn't a hope, especially with this tiny engine Cooper Climax car. Thus, the stage was set for Moss and Rob Walker racing to dupe their competitors and snatch victory from nowhere. Nevertheless, this master plan would take a lot of luck as well as some very careful and clever driving from Stirling. Moss would only complete 2 laps in practice, placing him 3rd from last. Therefore, from the outside world, it would appear that the Grand Prix would be a close battle between Fangio and Jean Bera in the Maserati cars, and Peter Collins, Luigi Musso and Mike Hawthorne in the Ferraris. However, Moss was a man on a mission, and he would put his tiny Cooper into the thick of battle right from the off. Straight away, Collins would find himself out of contention, suffering a driveshaft failure as he engaged the clutch off the line. Meanwhile, Bera had shot through to the lead on the first lap, only to lose out to Hawthorne on the second lap and then teammate Fangio a few laps later. As Hawthorne and Fangio continued to swap positions at the front, Moss began to work his way up, passing Musso and Bera before slipping past the second-place Ferrari as the race neared its halfway point. Fangio, surprised to find Moss challenging him for the lead, he began to push his Maserati very hard, setting a blistering time of 1 minute 41.8 seconds on lap 30, which could not be bettered. However, the Argentine could not keep this pace up. Fangio cooked his tyres, and 2 laps later he disappointed all his local supporters by having to relinquish the lead. Up until this point, Moss had been carefully preserving his tyres, but also had been forced to drive the race without a fully operational clutch, after his car on the 4th lap became jammed in 2nd gear, only to free up after a stone had found its way into the interlock mechanism. As Fangio limped into the pits on lap 35, Moss would now find himself with a full minute lead, as fading oil pressure had cost Mike Hawthorne precious time in the pits, and Jean Bera had spun away any real chance of putting up a fight. By this stage, Moss's strategy was fully underway, with his rivals content to sit back, believing that Moss would have to stop. The team also played a part in enhancing this charade by hanging out pitboard messages as Stirling drove past, which appeared to signal a countdown for an imminent stop. Such was the success of this maneuver that Moss's rivals did not realize that they had been duped until around 10 laps from the end, when Musso and Hawthorne, now running in a comfortable 2nd and 3rd in their scarlet Ferraris, were ordered to pick up the pace. With the bit between his teeth, Musso began carving his way into Moss's 33-second gap, increasing the pressure on the leader, who was now badly starting to struggle. It was thought that the tyres would last 40 laps under normal conditions, and this was an 80-lap race. After the tread had disappeared, Moss could see the white breaker strip, which warned him that his tyres would soon be running on their canvas. As the rubber continued to disintegrate all around him, Moss began to use as little steering as possible, even driving on the grass to limit wear and cool tyres. The Ferrari team on the pit wall began to panic, as the realization dawned on them that this ridiculous little car was not only going to try and run the race non-stop, that it was in fact going to beat them. Musso and Ferrari had made their move too late, and Stirling sneaked over the line 2.7 seconds ahead. What he had accomplished was quite unequalled. With a broken clutch, a crash gearbox, and tyres worn down to the canvas, he had taken on the entire Ferrari works effort and left it floundering. That he did this in what was essentially an obsolete Formula 2 car, and a rear-engine one at that, simply added insult to injury. Even more painful was the fact that he effectively conned them. In what was one of the most remarkable results in the history of the sport, Mossam Rob Walker Racing had outfoxed the bigger factory teams to score an unlikely triumph. The result was even more significant, as it was the first win for a privateer entry, the first for the Cooper Climax, and all importantly, the first ever triumph for a rear-engine car, which thereafter quickly became the norm for the design in the sport. What's more, Stirling Moss had done it all, wearing an eye patch after frolicking around with then-girlfriend Katie Molson. She had accidentally scratched his eye. But sure, look, and that's really it for today. I really hope you enjoyed the story. It has that classic underdog triumph that you rarely see anymore, and definitely a story that was worth telling. Please check out my other videos. Please like and subscribe, if you liked and subscribed it, of course. And if you didn't, good luck. Jesus, these tires are benjacks.